Section 1. Sigmund Freud. Freud challenged the assumption that the self was merely what can be seen on the surface. He argued that identity, personality, and mental function were far more complex than anyone had previously imagined. First, he claimed that there was a basic split between the conscious mind and a hidden unconscious mind. According to his theory of pleasure principle, the self is continually seeking to satisfy biological and instinctive needs grounded in the id. These are associated with sensual pleasure. Infants are able to satisfy these through the stimulation of orifices. But as we grow up and attain the sense of selfhood, we have to put these drives under the kind of control. Nevertheless, in his later work especially, he applied his psychoanalytic theories to exploring the wider culture of modernity. Here, he began to shift away from a model which privileged sexuality and suggested that life and death drives were central to the organization of modern society. Section 2. Post-Freudian theories of self and society. A focus on the way that society and its cultural organization are implicated in the problems experienced by selves. Even though much psychoanalytic theory is still of interest, primarily to the specialists, or is it not really very cultural, a good deal has filtered through mainstream cultural theory. Section 3. The Frankfurt School. Like Freud, emerged from a view that modern society restricts human freedom, but is more specific in placing the blame squarely at the foot of capitalism. As a fellow member of the Frankfurt School, it is hardly surprising that Herbert Marcuse sees the world in much the same way as Fromm. Yet while Fromm's solution to social and personal pathologies spoke of the need for greater social reflexivity, subjectivities, he had asserted that been shaped by the needs of the capitalist system, rather than attaining the true perspective afforded by critical reason. The one-dimensional man was a shallow person living an illusory life, voluntarily seeking to fulfill false needs. Marcuse writes that most of the prevailing needs to relax, have fun, to behave, and consume in accordance with the advertisements to love and hate what others love and hate belongs to this category of false needs. Section 4. Jacques Lacan. For those influenced by structuralism, post-structuralism, and discourse analysis, Jacques Lacan's writings from the 1950s and the 1960s are the key to theorizing the association of culture and psychoanalysis. One of the reasons for this is that his broadly post-structural approach shifts responsibility for the construction of the self away from biological drives towards language and culture. A key signifier within the law of the father is to the phallus. This represents mere authority and sexuality, and replaced Freud's somewhat biological focus on the penis. For Lacan, male dominance and identity are invested in the symbolic power of the phallus, while women are defined in terms of its aspects. These provide for our sense of selfhood and the roles we occupy. There is no timeless essence in the true selfhood to any of us, but rather the self is a fabrication and fiction. Section 5. Post-Lacanian Psychoanalytic Cultural Theory. By deftly combining psychoanalytic theories of the self with structuralist understandings of culture, Lacan's work has exerted a distinctive impact on cultural theory, especially in the areas of psychoanalytic feminism and literary and film criticism. Work in this post-structural tradition has several key features. One of the earlier and most influential attempts to apply Lacan's theory in a sociological way was Louis Althusser's exploration of subjectivity and the ideological state, apertures or ISAs. Women were in a sense excluded from language and defined by the lack of phallic authority. This line in his thinking has appealed to some feminist analysis, with Lacan being used as a tool for diagnosing the pathologies of patriarchal culture. For example, in Psychoanalysis and Feminism, Juliette Michel drawn Lacan to explore the ways that modern culture empowers men as active and creative while marginalizing women as slack and the other. Despite such uses, feminist responses to Lacan have been ambivalent. While they have generally applauded his demonstration that culture is patriarchal and that gender and sexuality are constructed by language and society, it has also been argued that his theory is ideological in as far as it reproduces the distortions of a wider culture. In Lacan's theory, as in language generally, men are positioned in terms of power and discourse, women as absent as the other, women are framed only as the not male or as having an absent phallus. There is no specifically female conceptual space. Section 6. Postmodern Psychoanalytics Cultural Theory. As we move from structural towards postmodern psychoanalytic theory, more and more attention is given to such issues of desire and pleasure alongside attacks on the concept of unitary subject. As the repository of desire, Anti-Oedipus by Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari is perhaps the most important text in this tradition. The book celebrates schizophrenia, fragmentation, and desire as radical tendencies in contemporary culture. For Deleuze and Guattari, endlessly proliferating schizophrenic desire holds out a transgressive and anarchic potential which will enable it to break down the psychological and cultural boundaries established by capitalism. They allege that the events of May 1968, when French students brought this country to a standstill, were an indicator of a new progressive schizopolitics. This downplays the institutional relationship structured by the politics and capitalism. Jean-François Lyotard, considered by many to be foremost commentator on postmodernism, also explore the connections between desire, culture, and the capitalist economy. For Lyotard, the ideological works through the multiplication of desire and libidinal energies rather than their repression and distortion. Section 7. Some concluding comments. For contemporary culture theorists, psychoanalytic theory has clearly offered the most elaborate and attractive discourse on the self. It is an area marked by continuing theoretical innovation that has attracted a number of formidable thinkers to its ranks. Its central concepts do not always seem amenable to empirical observation. It is a field marked by international division with innumerable factions and cliques. In addition to some scholars believe themselves to be scientists, others clinicians, and still others interprets or social commentators. Learning this takes years of study, and so text can be extremely difficult for the outsiders to understand. It operates with a prioritized belief that people are repressed, neurotic, sick, and so on. This relentlessly grim and pessimistic view makes the theory difficult to apply in an appreciative account of human creativity. The work of Giddens and Bourdieu, for example, suggests that it makes sense to think of people today in a very different way. That's all for me. Thank you very much. I've been MuhammadReifskyAlfares from Class A, and I'll see you next time.